Well, I mean, the short answer to that is no, they're not. In a lot of cases, we tend to only think of Bayanihan in its more modern manifestation. And of course, in its more modern national manifestation, it's Filipino spirit of cooperation, of selfless help to offering to people who are in need. It's about community identity. It's a whole lot of very positive and perfectly true traits within the sort of Filipino societies, because there are very obviously many different kinds of self or mutual aid associations that get lumped under what people think of as Bayanihan now, because there are lots of regional variants. And that's great, and that's always been one of the ways in which Bayanihan has worked, or its associated concept. However, to me, Bayanihan, if you look back historically, is a much more dyadic, contractual arrangement about reciprocity. You help me, I help you. It's about how labor was organized in farming communities. It's about how buildings were repaired. It's about when people were in trouble, a death or a disaster, when some kind of disease had taken loved ones, then it was about giving to those people. And it was about reciprocity, but there was a careful contractual basis to that. And people were fully aware of who gave what and how much, and therefore how much should be returned. And if you didn't, then you put yourself at risk. And I wrote a piece about 15 years ago on the dangers of going it alone in the Philippines, about precisely those kinds of situations where this kind of contractual dyadic relationship of reciprocity existed. And that, I think, for most people, what they meant by Bayanihan and its regional associates. I think that was the real concept. And then you had this other form of Bayanihan when the community as such was either in need for some sort of service like a baseball court or a school or something like that, or when it was in trouble from disasters or fire and things, and then people helped. So we've sort of kind of lost that first idea of what Bayanihan means, and we just focus on the second one, which has almost become a sort of national characteristic now. And I think people talk about it in that way. The government certainly uses it as a term to engender support for its policies, put it that way. And I think we can trace that back, and I'm sure actually you could probably go back further, but the most obvious one I think was Marcos during the New Society, and when he talked about this, so he used it as a corporative vision, special for in rural areas, of trying to get people behind his policies during martial law and such like. And I think there, it was almost became not a quasi-government policy. And then I think more recently, of course, it's been used very much by the present president, President Duterte, who is with Bayanihan to heal as one act, is clearly a reference to trying to mobilize the Filipino spirit. And I guess, and that what I was trying to say in that article is it's become something completely different, because Bayanihan was about on the ground basic sort of cooperation and a sort of a bottom-up approach towards aid and self-help. And now what we're talking about is very much a top-down kind of patronage from the state. So state, as it has done on previous occasions, is suborning concept for its own policies. And in one case, some of the more radical critics of Duterte have accused him of weaponizing the term, to be used. And I think there's a certain justification in that. So like most things in the Philippines, it comes down to politics, ultimately, in the end, Every region has its own term for this. But the one that's most commonly referred to in the archives is something called turnahan. And that comes from the Spanish turno, your turn, taking your turn, which is interesting because the only modern variant, the only modern usage of the term that I've found now is in basic Christian communities, where the roster for leading the scriptures and such like is called the Trenahan. But that's the one that is most common in the archive if it's trying to look at a generalized concept. Now, whether that's just because most of our sources are either Spanish or Spanish speaking Filipinos, and they're using a term that was understandable, but maybe it was just, it's a common usage at the time. But no, I don't find Bayanihan used at all. In fact, and I haven't seen a single reference to it in historical data at all.